welcome to Ripley RECALL. The Ripley RECALL is a podcast created by the Camp Ripley Public Affairs Office to highlight and discuss events and activities of Camp Ripley and the Minnesota National Guard, focusing on the people and operations that make up the many departments of Camp Ripley, interagency partners, environmental stewardship, major exercises, and the surrounding communities. The content of this podcast does not necessarily express or view the opinions of the state of Minnesota, the United States Army, or the Department of Defense. Today I am joined by Brigadier General Lowell Kruse, Assistant Adjutant General Army for the Minnesota National Guard, as well as the Senior Commander on Camp Ripley. Welcome, General.
Hey, thank you, Tony. I'm excited to see this format and what it's going to turn into over time.
Absolutely. We're off and rolling. Sir, for those who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I've served in Minnesota National Guard. This year's, I think, my 33rd year. I enlisted as a cadet out of South Dakota State, and like most soldiers can remember my enlistment date, September 22nd of 1988. So grew up on a farm in South Dakota, a dairy farm. I was the youngest of three kids, and there was a 10-year break between me and my older siblings, so I was kind of raised maybe as a only kid in the whole process as well.
Right.
So we had a dairy farm. At the height of the dairy farm, we milked about 70 Holstein cows. I had 480 acres of farmland that went with that, and spent my summers riding a tractor and throwing hay bales and taking care of calves and things like that.
Nice.
So, yeah. So I went to school at Grand Dual High School in Revillo, South Dakota. No longer exists. It's been part of the whole consolidation effort in South Dakota of schools that are closing. And graduated in 1985, went to South Dakota State. Went there to study agriculture, thinking that I would return to the dairy farm, and also joined the Army ROTC there because I always had an interest in the military, and just truly embraced that whole experience of the ROTC life at South Dakota State as part of Ranger Challenge and all sorts of exercises and things like that. Commissioned in 1989, and prior to commissioning, I had decided that I wanted to go back to the dairy farm. So one of the things I did was I was able to join the Minnesota National Guard that fall of 1988, and became a cadet in at that time, the 175 Field Artillery. Okay. Headquartered the battalion in Montevideo, and I was assigned to the small city of Dawson, Minnesota, which is about 20 miles east of my dairy farm. And so it was pretty convenient for me to be a National Guardsman for 17 years as a traditional soldier. So when I commissioned, I got the opportunity to have a reserve commission, and I joined the Minnesota National Guard as an officer then in 1989, went to OBC, and came back as a field artillery officer in the 175 till 1992, when the 175 then was converted into the 151 Field Artillery. Mm-hmm. Over time, I spent 17 years in that Field Artillery Battalion out in western Minnesota, and most of that time I was a full-time dairy farmer. So I would get up about 4 in the morning and milk my cows, and then driving anywhere from a half hour to an hour to guard drill at 8. And I'd get back home that evening and milk another round of cows and go to bed. So drill weekends were pretty busy for us. And then when it was time to go to annual training, I'd leave my bride in charge of milking my cows for 2 weeks, and pray that I came home to a dairy herd that I could still find, and that she would still talk to me at the end of that 2-week experience. And that was our life till 2004. And then in 2004, the 151 got activated to go to Iraq, tasked with building 2 in lieu of MP companies. So we split up 3 batteries of artillerymen and turned them into MP companies. And the battalion headquarters, which I was the S3 of, went over to Iraq to be a rear area operations center. Mm-hmm. And so in the summer of 2004, I sold about 60 Holstein cows, and thought I'd go back, go to war, come home, and go back to farming in some manner. But coming home from the war experience, I actually had built a lot of good relationships with people in the Minnesota National Guard, and I was able to leverage them to get hired full-time and come here to Camp Ripley and work. So I've been a full-time employee at Camp Ripley since 2006. Originally hired as the director of public safety, and did that position for almost 6 years, and then got the opportunity to be the G4. And then coming out of 5 years of being the state's director of logistics, I got the opportunity to get promoted and become the Army ATAC. So that's my story.
Okay, right on. What was it like coming in to the G4? I guess as your full-time job.
Well, I initially came in with a lot of thoughts of maybe illegitimacy because I had not grown up working full-time in the director of logistics. There's almost 400 employees across there, and there we have officers that track their whole career working as logisticians in the G4. Coming in as a 06 as a director in charge of that was a different experience for me because I had to convince a whole bunch of people that I knew how to be a good logistician as well. So I teased them a lot that, I'd spent 20 years of practical supply chain management running my dairy farm. And that led us, but I quickly, my job as a senior leader is to find, subject matter experts and good leaders and lean on them. And throughout the Department of Logistics, there were just some incredible officers that we were able to take advantage of their talents and take advantage of their good ideas and implement them. And so my first year being the desk log, one of the most important things we've done for the Minnesota National Guard is we consolidated all the maintenance activities here at Camp Ripley. So we created what we now call the CMA. Right. Prior to that was, they had three very distinct personalities with the mates and the CSMS and the FMS shop that was stationed here at Ripley. And I just thought it was impractical and inefficient to have three, essentially what we call wage supervisor 15 leaders running all those three organizations. And so we pared that down to one and put all those structures under the leadership of one individual, not three. And it eliminated some of the competition between the three elements, and obviously it helped streamline a lot of the efficiencies of how we do supply chain logistics, parts, that kind of stuff. Because now instead of having three separate elements that were ordering parts and competing at times, we were able to have one, supply system inside of the CMA to take care of all the mechanics that are fixing all the different types of equipment there. So,
right, more cooperative.
Yep. So that was one of our big projects the first year. Obviously, after that, we flowed into a lot of other firsts for the Minnesota National Guard. In 2016, we had the first time to NTC. So the year before that, 2015, we had our first XCTC rotation for the brigade that was here at Camp Ripley. And so just a lot of opportunities to hit home runs in the logistics world because we're stretching our logistics enterprise and trying to, figure out, how to do things. And the teams of people that we have and the quality leaders throughout the logistics world continue to surprise people what they can move, do, and haul at times. But, once the operators kind of explain what they need, be it a field artilleryman or a logistician, it's kind of the same thing. We got to understand the plan, and then we are in the background making sure the plan's successful. And those are same concepts between the field artillery and the logistics world in reality. So
okay. So through your career, did you ever picture yourself as being a general?
No. When I got commissioned, I have to be perfectly honest. I had a 4-year scholarship to go to through ROTC to pay for my college. I had left the farm, and my parents were going to pay for my college, and I just decided that I wasn't going to put that burden on them. So I got not a 4-year, but a 3-year ROTC scholarship as a sophomore, and with that came a 6-year commitment, and I truly felt that about 6 years was all I could probably, balance between being a farmer and being a soldier. Yeah, but so that that would have run me out to maybe being a captain, and that looked like success for me. But like a lot of soldiers, once you get into the process and into the organization, time just kind of creeps up on you. Right. Next thing you know, you're a you've been in for 10 years or 15 or whatever. And so, no, I would say, the first time it became, even a thought that I would be a general is when I was taken aside by General Neil Lloyd and told that I was going to have a submittal for a certificate of eligibility to the Congress to be a general. Prior to that, I figured I would serve until my MRD in 2019 and retires, whatever level I was at. But, as time marches and you're successful with what you're doing, you get promoted. And, and anybody will tell you the Minnesota National Guard for our officers can pretty much guarantee that if you're a good officer and keep your nose clean, we can make you a lieutenant colonel in a 20 to 30 year career. But the pyramid beyond that is all luck and timing. Right. And so I would say I just, was lucky in the fact that I was in the right place at the right time and others weren't, I guess. So.
Okay. What drew you to being an artillery officer? What was the excitement about
the artillery battalion that was 20 miles from my farm.
Right.
In reality, if it had been there was an infantry unit in Marshall, which was an hour away. If that infantry unit had been in Montevideo, I'd probably been an infantryman. So, but the same side of once I went to OBC and learned the skills that are required to be an artilleryman, I took a lot of pride in being an artilleryman, especially with being a gunner, figuring out the artillery solution of trying to drop a bullet in a basket at 6, 7, 8 miles is an interesting game. And so learning in school how to account for the rotation of the earth and how the wind's blowing that artillery shell in the air as it's flying through the air are all kind of cool concepts to learn and account for. And so that and like any unit, once you get in a unit, you gain a lot of pride over what that unit does. And I would say the field artillery is the same as in that realm. We have a lot of distinct culture and pride that, makes us pretty proud to be an artilleryman. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, now that you're out of that culture a little bit and kind of into the GO field, is it a little bit of a culture shock?
It's different, right? If you're a senior leader in any organization, you quickly realize that you're never not a senior leader. You're always a little isolated from the others. Not that I'm, feel sorry for myself or I'm isolated, I guess. But what I'm trying to say is, the statement that's lonely on top is a true statement sometimes, and so it's a little bit different. Obviously, being a general officer, there's a whole slice of Army culture there that I had never realized until I had the opportunity, so there's a processes for everything, and there's a process to make a general, and there's a process to, serve outside of the state. And so it's an interesting piece. I just got nominated for a national level board, and I'll represent the FEMA Region 5 on a capabilities board that's going to talk about what the Guard needs for capabilities for DOMOPs. So that's kind of interesting as well, as so that not only shaping the future of Camp Ripley, but also shaping the future of the Guard is kind of cool. So
yeah, absolutely. You put on the star in November of 17,
yeah,
right? How did the family unit fall along with that? How do they like the position?
Well, I think Amy, my wife, serves right alongside me. So, we tease that whatever rank we get as soldiers, our spouse is probably one rank higher. But, she's made a lot of sacrifices following the guidon. And, she's had to sacrifice professionally. When we left South Dakota and came to work here full-time, she left a full-time job as a county extension agent in South Dakota and really struggled for 10 years or so to kind of find her way of what's her identity. So, I think that's the challenge for children or spouses of senior leaders is you get forced to assume your the general officer or the colonel's identity is part of yours. And that's a struggle sometimes because, they're all individuals and they all want their own to be their credit for what they do, not for what somebody else is doing as well. Mm-hmm. But The other side of that coin is there's a whole piece of culture that she has to embrace as being the lady at Camp Ripley. And so we host, my mom used to joke that my dad would bring home all the stray dogs in the township to feed them. So we always had somebody at our house that he had found that needed help somehow. And I sometimes fall victim to that, inviting people all the time to my house to have a little bit of social environment. So sometimes that gets me into trouble because, Amy's probably not as excited sometimes of all the people that I do entertain. But, that comes with the position as the entertaining piece because, it's our job to ensure that people that come here and visit, have a memorable time. So
Right. Absolutely.
So
What type of projects have you championed since you started?
Well, as the senior commander here, as essentially the base commander Monday through Friday, it's been an interesting game. The first project was trying to describe the terms and references for a general on the installation. That's, the base commander Monday through Friday, but we still have this garrison organization run by Colonel Seimer. And how do you pair out those responsibilities and that? So kind of defining that is important to me because I don't want this to be a one and done with a general officer here at Ripley because then it was done just for Lowell Kruse, and I don't think that's right. So I'm trying to put in place the structure that will allow us to continue to have an assistant adjutant general assigned here to work full-time on the installation. I think that's a very effective structure and gives us a lot of credence for the importance of Camp Ripley. Now, it creates a few more problem sets maybe because, I do have 4 directorates on the installation and so, what was the spirit of cooperation sometimes now becomes a subordinate relationship and, that causes some friction sometimes as well because, all of a sudden we're maybe doing things because the general said so rather than because, in a spirit of cooperation, we think it's the right thing to do. So I'm trying to balance that all the time because, I'm very much a participative leader. And so I want everybody to feel good about what they're doing and that it's the right thing to do. So we worked across the installation. It was important to me as the G4 to expand what we have for rail capabilities, so I'm pretty proud of that. 2 years ago, we built a siding outside of the base, and we're working this next year. We'll start the design of 2 rail spurs inside the base. That was pretty prevalent to me as the G4. I went to a rock drill about 5 years ago when we were really rattling our sabers against Korea and trying to understand how you would mobilize the Army to go to Korea, and it was pretty evident that we needed a rail structure across America, and it was in jeopardy. And so my goal was to come back here and try to at least fix my end of it. And I think we've done a pretty good job. I think once the spurs are done, we'll take a load out of a brigade's worth of armored equipment and take it from a 10-day problem set potentially down to 2 or 3 if they run 24-hour ops. And so we'll be able to load train cars faster than probably Burlington Northern can take them at that point, which is the best that we can do. That's the goal for everybody is, outwork the next person in the chain so they're waiting for you or that you're waiting for them, not the other way around.
Right, absolutely.
So I'm excited. The tornado came through in 2016 and tore down a whole bunch of buildings. So what I joke about in the public is being urban renewal. I wish you could direct some of that urban renewal, but pretty excited about the buildings that replaced it and the capabilities that brought to us. I was just driving by Area 7 today, and I was thinking about the new maintenance shelter there, which is twice as big as the one that was there. And that building's probably not going to see a lot of wrenches turned into it, but it's going to be a permanent home of a lot of the traffic associated with the rec center and the mission command training center that we've kind of built around the rec center. So that's pretty cool. I'm excited about the fact that we've found a permanent home for the State Patrol and the Emergency Management Training Center. The cooperation we've had with HSEM to open up that facility for more permanent party. And so, we moved the State Patrol in there first so that their academy would have a permanent home. And then this last year, we've moved the DNR law enforcement team in there as well. So their academy will have a permanent home in that building, which allows them to brand the building. And, branding's important when you're trying to build a culture, and that's what they're doing with their young officers. Right. But it also gives them a home where they don't have to tear stuff down and pack it away. And, so that's pretty cool, and moving the DNR out of Nelson Hall over there gives us an opportunity to return the installation headquarters into the historic building that it started out in, and as a lover of history, I truly, have driven by Nelson Hall for, almost 15 years saying I wish the post headquarters was back in there. So that was nostalgia pulling there. But, once you peel back the onion layers of how we're going to occupy that building, I think it's going to make us as a installation headquarters more efficient. But more importantly, it puts us back in the eyes of everybody that's here on the installation. When I was an M-Day soldier coming here for 17 years, I didn't even know there was a garrison commander or a training support unit, Yeah. And so, and they were all located here in the Armory, and the Armory was fairly new at that time, and I had no clue who they were, what they did. And so I think just the prominence of being in Nelson Hall, puts a stamp on where the headquarters is and where the leaders are. So
yeah, absolutely.
So,
well, good. Well, thank you. So we're going to take a quick break for a moment.
Meeting the basic requirements. That's what the rest of the world does. Contributions come easy. Commitment, on the other hand, is hard. True commitment takes a concerted effort on your part. Working hard and giving 100% is your commitment. You will find that day when your muscles ache, your joints are sore, and you don't know how you will carry on. It is in that moment when you look deep within yourself and find that which motivates you to drive on. You will not accept defeat because quitting is not in your nature. Instead, you will pick yourself up and show the world your level of commitment, because that commitment is at the core of who you are. It takes drive, the kind that doesn't fade when impossible obstacles are staring you in the face. How badly do you want to succeed? This is about commitment, a commitment to yourself, a commitment to those around you, and a commitment to make a difference. You will succeed because you are America's future. There must be a willingness to march a little further, to carry a heavier load, to step out into the dark and the unknown for the safety and well-being of others. Now that, my friends, is commitment. We live here, we work here, we serve here. We are the Minnesota Army National Guard.
All right, welcome back to Ripley Recall. I'm talking with Brigadier General Lowell Kruse, Assistant and Adjutant General Army for the Minnesota National Guard and Senior Commander on Camp Ripley. Sir, we talked quite a bit about everything that's coming up in your career and, the things that you've come through in order to get into the position that you're in. I guess my next question is, what kind of future ambitions do you have on the horizon?
Well, I've told Major General Mankey that sometime in 2023, it'll be the appropriate time for me to leave working full-time here as the installation commander. That decision's really based on, my family, I guess. My youngest son, Connor, is a junior right now in Pierce High School, and he'll graduate in the spring of 23. So, at that point, Amy and I will be ready to transition if we have to. And so it'll be 6 years of having me here as the senior commander at that point, and most throughout our history here of installation commanders, 6-7 years are probably the max length. And I truly think that's probably a good thing because, it takes 7 years to build something here. And so, ideas that I've put into the master plan will come to fruition probably in 3-4 years after that. But, it'll be time for somebody else's ideas to come in as well. Okay. I'm hoping that I might get an opportunity to work for a couple of years after that as just a traditional soldier. We'll see if I get an opportunity to get another GO job within the state. But if I don't, I'll be pretty proud of my time. And Amy and I have purchased a property over in South Dakota. So once we now have another home to move our stuff to once we have to vacate this beautiful home we live in here. And so there's work to be done there, fence to be built, and that, we'll move our 5 horses over there, and we'll train horses, train dogs, and enjoy the sunsets on the prairie in South Dakota.
Yep.
So yeah.
Great. Is there also a family legacy with being in the military, sir?
Well, my dad was a World War II vet. He was turned 18 in 1944, so he had a farm deferment for the first year because he was the primary farmer on my great aunt's farm. He ran the farm for her. But then he got pulled into World War II in 45 and trained to. It's funny, he trained to be a parts clerk, so he had to memorize thousands of lines of numbers associated with all the different parts available in the supply system as a parts clerk. But then when he got to his first duty station, they looked at him and said, "We need you to be a cook." So he spent about 6 months at the end of World War II running a dining facility at Aberdeen Proving Grounds. So that longer back in the legacy, my great grandfather was in the German army and deserted from the German army in the 1870s so he could come to America. And so I joke around, and then I had a great uncle that was a bootlegger and during the Depression. So I joke around that I come from a long line of, bootleggers and deserters. But in reality, my dad's service, pretty proud of that. And, my son Jacob is a captain on active duty right now. He's stationed in Fort Knox. He's going to take over company command of an engineer company in Fort Knox here this spring. So we're kind of excited for that opportunity for him. At some point, I hope he's happy with his active duty career and he comes back to the National Guard. That's the plan right now, to finish out his military career. We'll see, time creeps up on him too. He'll be a 7-year captain at that point. So, we'll see if we can convince him to come back and be a reserve soldier or if he'll just stay on active duty to finish out his 20. So that's pretty cool experience. I don't think Connor will get the opportunity to serve. He's got some health concerns with asthma and that's probably going to affect his ability to get through MEPS and get recruited. But we're pretty proud military family. Obviously, Amy's dad served in the Vietnam era, and my Uncle Harold was a Korean War vet. So there's a lot of veterans running around in the Kruse family. So
great.
Yeah.
As we're talking about retirement and sunsets and things like that, what are some of the more memorable events that you can remember here from Camp Ripley?
Well, I think one of the coolest events my first year being a general officer was the Christmas party that we held at the hangar. Colburn's and Perkins caters a Christmas party for us every year, and that was kind of the first year we moved it into the hangar and really stretched ourselves to include everybody on the installation. And we did a few activities of trying to get feedback from people that work here every day, and truly that's exciting for me because I value other people's opinions, and so that's a memorable event. Obviously, the success of the D Parks Woods campground's pretty cool. I'm excited. When we cut the ribbon into Nelson Hall will be a memorable day for me. Because it'll be cool to go back into that atmosphere of that building. That building's got so many historical aspects that I want to share with people and teach them. So that'll be pretty important. The opportunity to live in the installation commander's house and all the stories of the history of that building is pretty cool as well. The background of Colonel Rosberg and his wife that helped design and build that house to all the different families that have lived there since is a cool legacy and will be a fond memory as well. So, yeah.
Great. With a lot of young officers out there of all types of different branches and career goals, do you have any advice for young officers coming up?
I do, yeah. First thing I would tell everybody is never take yourself out of consideration. So what's that mean? Never always get ahead on your education so that, when we're looking at the list of who's eligible, you're on the list because you're caught up in your education. And then obviously your height, weight, PT requirements, those kind of simple things take you out of consideration sometimes. And I've seen a lot of people that had potential that didn't go anywhere because of that. Relationships matter in our organization. We'd like to think that it's just black and white, but the people portion of leadership involves relationships. And, the leadership is a trust business. The way you build trust is to build relationships, and that's loyalty that goes both directions. So, I give a kind of an overview of leadership, and leadership's really got three elements. There's competency, there's commitment, and then there's character. And I can send you to school and make you the most competent public affairs NCO possible, right? Teach you how to run all this equipment we're talking and all that. And I can reward you with good events, and that spurs on your commitment to come back tomorrow and continue to work. But it's really character that makes leaders. And inside a character, there's all sorts of different virtues that make up a leader. And we all have them in different levels. There's no, 10 virtues, and each one of them is 10% of 100% of a leader. But, so some people have more humanity, more humility, more, stick-to-itiveness, things like that are part of their character traits. Obviously, there's pieces of your character that you inherited from your parents, right? I inherited height from my parents, which, allows me to stand out in formations and, becomes that beacon in the night to go find as a leader, which, I would say has always helped me in the process. But confidence, things like that are all part of that character trait. And if, and the other side of that character trait is your integrity and those elements that make up trust, right? And if you lose them, you lose the trust of the people you're trying to lead, and you're at that point ineffective. So, So guard your character. It's the most important piece of being a leader. So.
Looking back, 20 years from now, if you're looking back at the Minnesota National Guard, what are some of the things that you hope to see?
Well, we continue to morph right now. We're trying, we're going to take the division and turn it into the only penetration division that's in the National Guard, which means it's going to be a super heavy division that's going to have 3 armored brigades in it, and probably give it the opportunity to be the spearhead if we ever have to go back into conflict in Europe against the Russians, or maybe, God forbid, the Chinese someplace. But so I'm curious to see that develop. I'm excited that the Army brought back Division Artillery Headquarters. We configure the Army for the conflicts that we're in or we anticipate to be in. So, in the early 2000s, we went to modular brigades, and brigades became the lead element, and it kind of fit what we were moving into in reality in Iraq and Afghanistan, where, an 06 was in charge, and, that was probably the level of leadership you needed to get things done. In a more kinetic, multi-domain battlefield, you're going to need 3-star generals trying to, try to manage the whole process, corps commanders, those kind of things. So I'll be interested watching the National Guard force structure here in Minnesota and how that all those decisions affect that. I'm excited to come back in 24, or we hope late the fall of 24, maybe the spring of 25, to watch the ribbon cutting of the new museum. That's one of the things I'll be very proud of once it comes out of the ground and gets built, because, I helped shape the location of that and the idea of moving it off the installation. It always had been talk, and I'm pretty proud of the fact that I helped spur that organization to actually start moving which will be a beautiful location and beautiful museum when it's done. And like I said, as a lover of history and a historian, that's telling that story of what our predecessors have done is pretty cool. So I'm excited to see that. So I'll be excited to see how the guy that replaces a guy or gal that replaces me, uses Nelson Hall and enjoys it as a headquarters. I hope they have the same level of enjoyment that I know I'll get out of the process. So
Good.
And then we're trying to understand how to position Ripley for the future, whatever the future fight is, right? We're trying right now, we're trying to figure out how to make East Range a longer range for our tank crews, because we know that they're going to continue to have to kill things deeper for protection reasons. So, we've got some constraints on land on Camp Ripley as well, and we're right at the cups right now of any kind of collective training almost being too big for our 53,000 acres, which is amazing,
Right.
But, Ripley's going to have another 100 years worth of purpose, and it'll train a lot more soldiers. So
Good. Well, sir, I think this wraps up our time on this episode of the Ripley Recall. I thank you for joining me. And
yeah, I'm excited that I was part of the inaugural attempt. Obviously, you'll have to cut out about half of it, but it's a great conversation. I think it's a great format. I look forward to you interviewing other great leaders inside of Camp Ripley and across the state, and so that we can continue to, see the thoughts behind the person, which is what this format brings you. So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, sir. And this wraps up our episode of the Ripley Recall. Listen in for more information. Thank you.